Next up here, we have the Montreal Monkeys, and I'm kind of excited to see what they can do this year. They kind of got a chip on their shoulder now after having a losing record. They only went 7-11, but I am electing to put them over the Wolves just because they beat them in the playoffs. And this team has a lot of athleticism and a lot of talented pieces that I think aren't really puzzling together right now, but I could see them having a big season. Went conservative with their ratings, definitely, just because we didn't see a lot of production. I went with an 87 offense just because that Hohenschad and Blair duo was just unstoppable down the stretch. I mean, he had, I think, 11 touchdowns in the playoffs, which is just unheard of. That's absurd production. Would like to see someone step into that wide receiver 2 role. We'll talk about it later. They have some athletic pieces that haven't really shown out yet. However, I think they easily could with a couple adjustments and maybe a little bit more designed involvement. So obviously, that being said, MVP is Hunter Hohenschad just because he had a little bit more production on defense, and Offensive Player of the Year is Matt Blair. I kind of knocked him a little bit in the awards just because his production came solely from one player, which down the stretch here, as we expand to 4-on-4 and possibly more in the future, I just think that doesn't really signify MVP Offensive Player of the Year for me. Could have made the All-Pro team, I think, but compared to the other two quarterbacks, I think that I just wanted to give them the nod a little bit more just because of they ran the ball more, which I think he can definitely do. We'll see if they utilize him that way down here in the next season. Defense, they really struggled at times to stop a lot of different teams, which is why I gave them an 84. I feel like that might even be a little generous because of what we saw happen against the Jammers in Week 4 last year. They gave up so many rushing yards. It was crazy. It was like every play he was taking off for a touchdown. I definitely think they have the talent on their roster to do something about that and change that. Went with 82 coaching, definitely around average. We'll talk about that a little bit later because there is a player rating I want to get into with that one. 84 overall, just pretty average team. I think they will step up next season. Went with a Chargers team comparison just because I feel like we talk about it every year. The Chargers have so much talent on their roster and they can never really perform. Hopefully that changes for them in the future. A+ at quarterback, not even going to sugarcoat it. I think they have the best one in the league. Just didn't really see crazy production like I would have thought based on solely talent. Didn't really run the ball a lot. Could definitely see him doing that more in the future. Crazy strong arm. Just hope to see a huge season out of him this year. C at running back, don't really even run the ball. They gave the occasional handoff to Greg Fonte just to get him involved. I don't think we'll see much of them doing that anymore just because they have this crazy wide receiver connection. C+ at tight end, they don't have a lot of size on offense, although we will talk about one person down the road who is a very good tight end that could definitely up that rating here if he produces a little more next season. D-line and linebacker, I just had to give them no better than a C+. I do think they have some good tacklers on their team, but the way they defended the run in Week 4 against Jacksonville is just god-awful, for lack of a better word. I mean, couldn't give them better. Corner, I gave them a B- as well as safety. They do play good coverage at times. They have good corners on this team. They have athletic players. They have good players, I would say. Just didn't really show it this past season. Maybe it was adjusting to the league rules or something, but I do expect them to have a bigger season this year. They have all the talent in the world. We just have to see them tap into it. Kicking things off here, we have Matt Blair, who I believe to be the most talented quarterback in the league. That 99 arm strength is a big reason why. He tends to be pretty accurate as well. I gave him a Josh Allen player comparison. He's a Bills fan. He looks like Josh Allen. He plays like Josh Allen. There was really no other player comparison that made any sense. 94 scrambling. I think that's a very fair rating. It didn't reflect this year just because he only had like 6 carries. Would like to see him run more. I think that would be really entertaining. I think he could do it. I think he will win an MVP if he does it, which Josh Allen may be in contention for that this season. We'll see. Went with Stephon Gilmore on defense. He is a really good corner, as is Stephon Gilmore, and A lot of the media that I put out kind of makes him look like a worse corner than he is, because it seemed like he was a victim of a lot of the big plays. That can be said for Stephon Gilmore as well in the NFL. A lot of people think he's washed up just because he's had a couple big plays against him, but it's not the case in either sense. Matt Blair is one of the better corners in the league. Big, physical, strong, plays tight coverage. I think could be the cornerback one for Montreal. It's definitely a debate. But I think overall he could contend for MVP next year if he plays more defense and if he runs the ball a little more. Next up, we have Hunter Hohenschad. He had a crazy season. Could have probably contended for MVP if there was less crazy seasons out there. Just overall, a really wild statistic season. I mean, he had 22 touchdowns, which is more than we ever saw in the Vermont League, I think. I'm not 100% sure on that. But overall, he was just Blair's number one target, and Blair has a really strong arm, and he is really good running deep routes. So we saw a lot of dots right to him for touchdowns. Overall, just really good wide receiver all around. That's why I went with Cooper Kupp. Gets a lot of receptions, always seems to be open, really sure-handed. That's just all I really have to say about him on offense. Great receiver. We'll see what he can do in year 2. On defense, Darius Slay is the comparison I went with. Just all around, good corner, athletic, just kind of goes under the radar a little bit, I'd say, but he's a very solid corner. Next up here, we have the tight end I mentioned earlier in the video. Really, when you see this guy, he is not the type of player you would think based off his build. I'd say about probably 6'6". But the player comparison I went with is Kyle Pitts, and I would just expect a guy like him who has that much of a height advantage to be more of like a catch and traffic guy and more sure-handed, but he's really not. He's really fast for his size, super athletic, and I mean, that just kind of just dials up Kyle Pitts to a T. That's just really what he is, super athletic for his size, freak athlete, as well as Jeremy Chin on defense. I mean, he played very well on both sides of the ball. I think that we could see more offensive production out of him just because of how much of a size mismatch he is. It's just kind of the fact that he's not super good at contested catches downfield, which that's kind of Blair's strong suit, and we saw Hohenschad excel in that role, so why would he bother looking anywhere else? Not a knock on him, just the truth. Went with Jeremy Chin for a defensive comparison, as I was saying. Really good coverage, like amazing coverage for someone of his size. There's no 6'6" corners in the NFL. Jeremy Chin's 6'3" and super athletic. I mean, this guy just truly a freak athlete. Next up here, we have Nolan Wood, running back. I went with Alvin Kamara for his player comparison just because of how smooth he is when he's running the ball. Very good vision. And also offers a lot as a receiver. I think that we could definitely see him up his production as Montreal, I think, has a bounce-back season. And on defense, definitely saw some good out of him, which is why I went with a younger corner, Trent McDuffie. I definitely think he has a lot of talent, and I would love to see him tap into it more this season. Next up, we have Greg Fonte. Running back, I gave him a comparison of Najee Harris. I see him posting a lot of Steelers stuff, so I'd assume he's a Steelers fan, and I think they play pretty similarly, so it definitely fit well. Breaks a lot of tackles, definitely more of a physical runner, and I think that just fit pretty well as a player comparison. On defense, I gave him Deron Bland. Deron Bland, just crazy season. Didn't play the tightest coverage, but would always seem to come up with an interception, which is why I think it fit super well. Definitely a back-and-forth season for Fonte at cornerback. Led up a lot of big plays, also had a lot of big plays, and we'll see kind of what he is more of a player as the sample size increases. But for now, I went with a Deron Bland comparison, gave him an 84 overall, right on that cusp of average and good, I'd say, just based off of how, like, night and day his season was with these big plays on either end. And I went with an 83 on offense, just because we didn't see a lot out of him. He was definitely a good runner in a limited sample size. Next up here, we have Michael Costantino. I went with Elijah Moore on offense. We didn't see a lot out of him, but seemed like he was pretty crisp on those short routes and somewhat sure-handed, definitely a good athlete. Didn't really see much out of him on offense, so we'll see what he has to bring in year 2. Where he really shined was on defense, where I gave him an 84 overall. Great pass rusher, up there in league leaders in sacks. Definitely strong, definitely good at shedding blocks. Went with a Cam Jordan player comparison. Overall, I feel like that's a pretty good fit just because of the sack production and just the way that he plays. And the final player here is Dennis Ivanov, who we did not see really any play out of. He came out to support the boys a little bit. I don't think he really played any snaps this year. Correct me if I'm wrong. Just went pretty conservative with his ratings. What I ended up giving him for player comparisons are Randall Cobb and Josh Norman, because he's more there as like a locker room guy. Just keeps team morale high, cracking jokes on the sideline, just keeping everyone loose. I definitely feel like that was more of his role. As we move into 4-on-4, I hope to see him definitely take the field some more. Just a lot in store for this Montreal team that I'm excited to see. And finally here, the person that all of Montreal's fans hate, Sydney Blake. Now, she is just a god-awful play caller. Cannot motivate the team to get out of bed. Horrible scout, horrible recruiter. Did not make any additions during the season. But the dedication is there. That is what I will say. Was there for, I believe, 11 games, and Montreal only won one of those, so maybe she should stop showing up. Went with the Matt Canada player comparison just because horrible, needs to be fired. Something needs to change. Definitely the reason for Montreal's shortcomings this season. That is going to be it for Montreal here. Overall, just waiting to see them tap into how much talent they seemingly have. Just probably need a change in coaching to do so. Overall, I'm excited to see what they do in year 2, and subscribe. Make sure to stay tuned, as we will have 4 more of these coming for the top 4 teams, and thank you for listening.